Well, I'm sure we're going to have more Stragos coming in, but I'm delighted to see people here. And first of all, delighted to welcome Steve Kozarev. Did I have that name? Did I pronounce that right?
Pretty close, Kosarev.
Kozarev here. He had reached out to us to our club about the book he's going to be talking about, and happened to see the email. And also, Bob Harris was on there, and he suggested maybe we have Steve on. So it's just great. We're delighted to have you, Steve. So. Looking forward to talk to you about your book just a moment. I'll just start with some quick club business. Well, first of all, it's just days away from the first day of summer. We're going to feel it coming in a few days. We're going to see about 95 here, so that'll be fun because we know it'll be met with a lot of humidity. But at any rate, in terms of announcements, I don't have a lot, but I got to point out a couple of things worth noting. On We have a couple of events at the New England Wireless and Steam Museum. Um, One is going to be, I believe it's still on. I haven't checked whether it's been canceled, but there is going to be a annual ARL Field Day with Fidelity Amateur Radio Club, and it'll be on the June 28th to 29th, and that runs from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. But the one that uh, Rob Vincent reached out to me that on July 12th at the same museum, at the New England Wireless and Steam Museum, they're going to have the tune-up and vintage radio swap meet. And that will be on the 12th from 9 to 3. And so that's plenty of heads up for that, but I'm going to announce it again uh, come our July 2nd Zoom meeting. But I wanted to get the word out because I know they're always happy to get some of us who, because a lot of us live up in the northern parts of New England, but to see some of the Nevik people show up is always nice to see. And um, and who knows what you might find in terms of if you're looking for that piece of equipment. Plus, they have a terrific museum there anyway. I think that's about it in terms of announcements. Does anybody else have any announcements they want to throw our way that I haven't brought up? That includes you, Bob, in case there's anything going on. Bob Bennett, that is, and for the NJARC. Is there anything worth noting? Do speak up.
Not that I'm aware of. Paul, I don't think we have anything coming up. Paul, by the way, Paul Mondock here is the vice president of the New Jersey Antique Radio
Oh,
Club. So I know this is his first time, guys. So be
yeah.
gentle.
Welcome, Paul. I was going to, I apologize because we were talking about TVs. I regrettably didn't welcome both Paul because I know that over email, we had talked shortly about, briefly about you joining. So welcome as your first meeting. I hope it will not be your last meeting. Um, or we'll try our best not to scare you away. Uh, but also just a quick hi to Russ, Gary, and David, and of course Bob Bennett for joining late. I never got a chance to say hello, but good to see you guys. Um, so yeah, okay. So um, well then, without further ado, I'm very pleased to have Steve come on to talk to us about his most recent book he's introduced that we would love to talk about in terms of the early days of television. And and Steve, on top of it, you wrote a book preceding it, and so we sort of interested in hearing. First of all, what brought you down this road of talking about television, and but love to talk about your more recent book because I know in the meeting invite I shared the link for the book on Amazon, but we'd love to be able to hear more about the book and
Sure.
what brought you down this road, and also it's the very interesting period of early TV.
Well, like probably most all of you guys, I grew up with television and was fascinated, not just so much the programming, but how it worked, and particularly the cultural aspect of it, and the advertising and everything related to it. And I remember early on collecting some ads. My parents, one of the few magazines they took was a Reader's Digest. And I remember going through those and I found television set ads in them and I pulled them out and I discovered them years later. And when I was in college for an American history class, I ended up writing a paper about early commercial television, which I still have. And so I have this history that goes back, many years, dating back to at least that paper. And I, when I first got on the internet, I started to meet guys who collected sets and stuff and was just amazed. And one of them was Ed Reitan. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him or not, but he did a lot of work on restoring early color videotape. And he was part of the team that restored the oldest known color videotape, which was a dedication of NBC's Washington, D.C. station in 1958. And Dwight Eisenhower was president then, and they had a big thing. He came out to the station and gave a speech, and Robert Sarnoff was there, and the whole thing, the main thing was it started off in black and white, and you see Eisenhower's Cadillac motorcade entering, driving up to the studio, and then inside, while he's at the days, he's Robert Sarnoff joins in and then says something, when I push this button, everything will turn to color, and then it does. And it's just amazing seeing that, then, and even, what, 50, 60 years later, and that this videotape still exists. And Ed Reitan was instrumental in helping restore that, and particularly the first Fred Astaire special, which aired a few months later in October of 1958. And prior to that, the only thing they thought they had was, black and white kinescope. And his wife at the time, I believe she had the color videotape was in her possession. And she finally allowed them to do it. And like with the Eisenhower tape, they managed to jerry rig a machine, a 2-inch machine at KTLA, and they thought they might only get one pass, so they had to have everything set up to do that. And they ran it, and fortunately, there weren't any problems on both of these tapes and the passes. And then they started to work on it digitally. And it's amazing to see that Fred Astaire, because they also did live commercials for, I think Chrysler was the sponsor. You may have seen this. And I believe I don't know if the whole show is on YouTube, but it wasn't at the time that I saw it. And Ed Reitan actually invited me over to his apartment in Westwood here, and he showed me these things, and it was amazing to see, something that looked live, 50, 60 years ago, and then to see these Chrysler commercials. These cars were, they were shiny, they were new. It's like, it was just amazing. So as he showed me, and he started collecting a lot of equipment. And I met a couple other collectors who collected a lot of old television sets. And I started to think, this really should be a museum for all this. And this was around 1998. And so I, put together a proposal and wasn't able to get anything off the ground. But I thought, well, I have all this material. So I did a little more research, and I thought, I'm going to write a book. And so I put something together, put a manuscript together, and somebody suggested sending it to Chronicle Books in San Francisco, which I did. And they have a room there where they get all their stuff that's sent, spec, it's cold. And then the editors will go down there occasionally and look at things. And so this one editor did, and he liked the images and everything I had. He said, well, I don't want to do a text-heavy book. And I said, well, I think I know what you want. So I actually did another manuscript that was much more image intense. And they ended up publishing that book called Window to the Future. And let's see if you can see a copy of it here.
Yeah, let me, in fact, I'll spotlight you there.
Yeah, this was 20
Yeah.
years ago. Is it? Oh, it's
Yeah.
reversed.
No, we can see it fine on our side.
Okay,
It's
because I'm
perfect.
seeing it reversed here. And as you can see, it's mostly image heavy. It's all the images are from my collection over the years. And the one in particular that still stands out to me, there's a section on color television here. And this, let's see, you can see this
Oh,
ad.
yes,
This
sure.
was an, yeah, you may have seen this. This was an ad. If you didn't see it in the book, it appeared in TV Guide about a week before the George Gobel broadcast. And they decided basically his show that week was basically a 60-minute for our 60-minute program for RCA products. And so what they did, it was also the first stereo broadcast.
Hmm.
And so what they did is they were telling you in this TV Guide ad, if you put your AM radio a certain distance from your TV set, you're going to pick up one channel will be the left channel, the other will be the right. So you can actually hear the show, the program in true stereo, base as much as your AM radio could produce at the time.
Wow.
And so it tells you what to do. And then they suggested, for people who didn't have color TV sets at the time, which was probably most everybody watching the program,
Oh,
they
sure.
ended up including this half. So when George Gobel told you, hold this up, put it on the bottom half of your TV set, and then he and these dancers or models did this pose. So you could see the bottom half of your black and white set in color for a brief second. Now,
Ah,
now the color
that's
they're talking,
clever.
yeah, the color they're talking about reproducing was nowhere near what the sets were capable of at the time. This color photograph is closer to high definition television than what the program was at the time. So that was in TV Guide. See if there's anything else that stands out. But I had it sold okay. I got really excited. Chronicle did a certain amount of marketing and promotion for it, and then they just sort of let the ball drop. But prior to that, we had a really nice 6-page color spread in Long Island's Newsday, and that was syndicated by the Tribune Syndicate. And so that article, not the color photos, but the article appeared in a lot of Tribune newspapers across the country. And so I was really happy about that. And one day I was, even before the book came out, about a month prior, I'm standing in the supermarket checkout line and I'm thumbing through a copy of Vanity Fair and I happen to come across this thing. And there's a little blurb about my book in it that I wasn't even aware of that they were going to do. So, having somebody do promotions and marketing that you don't have to do is a big help.
Sure.
So the book has uh, been cited by academic papers and books at least 12 times since it came out. And so that just goes to show that there really isn't a lot of printed material about the cultural aspect of television sets. And so, I had other ideas for television related books, and the Glass Eye Invasion was actually, it gestated a long time. And so I finally realized I'm going to have to go ahead and publish this myself. And Amazon is printed it, and they did a pretty nice job of doing that. And so I'm trying to get some press still on it. A library edition is coming out. Here's this book right here. Let's see if you can see that.
Yes, we can. Yeah, that's your most recent. When did your first book come out?
20 years ago,
20 years
February.
ago. Wow.
Yeah,
Okay, because I thought it was
yeah,
2005 because I thought I saw some
yeah,
blur. So
yeah.
that's still in print and available?
I don't think it's in print anymore, but I've seen copies on sale. I don't know if they're new copies, or there's used copies you can at least find. I'm thinking of maybe doing a reprint, depending on what happens with the Glass Eye Invasion.
Sure.
Chronicle told me that they would, give me the digital materials to do that. So I may end up doing that later down the line, but. Um, I hear things, I see things about it. It was actually in 2 documentaries. It was in mine, and then there was a documentary called Last Exit Through the Gift Shop, I think. And during the section with artist Shepard Fairey, they're interviewing him, and in the background you could see the spine for Window to the Future. And I had a book agent at the time, and he noticed it and told me, but I didn't even know it was in the film, but it was that prominent. So it got some spread, and it did okay. Uh, so I set off to do. I've done a couple other things. I had a true crime book come out a few years ago about our family doctor, and then I've written some other things that haven't been published yet. But the Glass Eye Invasion was always sort of in the back burner, and spent a lot of time developing this. And I wanted to tell the story of what happened to television since when they were first introduced into the American home. And it's a very short period of time, 1948 to about 1953, when the invasion of television sets happened. And I did all original research. I went ahead to sources, back to old magazines and newspaper articles to the direct, impact of what people were saying and doing at the time and feeling about television sets. And I came across some great material and some great images, ones that I didn't have, and they're included in the book. And the cover of this book here is actually from an 8 millimeter still that I have, and was from a parade in Hawthorne, California, that a television and appliance dealer named Lloyd Denis paid for. And it was actually broadcast locally here on KTTV. And this woman was on a float with this TV set. And I managed to do a screenshot capture of her right at the moment she's waving and looking directly into the camera. And the image was, because it's 8 millimeter film, wasn't that clear. So I had to sharpen it. And I used actually AI for the first time. And it actually sharpened her face so that it was worth using as the cover shot for this book. And same situation in the back of the book. Here's another woman who was in that parade. And I actually have one of these sets. And she's got a sash on. So I'm going to say she was a television princess. She's the High V. I think the Hot Point TV queen here on this float.
Wow, that's terrific. That's really interesting.
And if you go on YouTube, I actually have, under Glass Eye Invasion, I actually have footage from that parade. And then you see this woman on the cover as her float's going by, and then it freezes on the cover of the book at the end. So if you want to take a look at that, you can.
Oh, that's good to know. I didn't realize you have some YouTube content.
Oh, yeah. I actually have a podcast. If you search whoever you get your podcast from for the Glass Eye Invasion, I think is a title, and that'll pop up, and you'll hear a couple discuss the book. So we have a little podcast. I can actually, let's see. So in the book, I start off talking about the World's Fairs, the 1939 World's Fairs in New York and San Francisco, because that's where a lot of press and people got their first dose of television or heard about it. And I tried to write about stuff that people have not read about before. And I came across some interesting information, which I've included in that. And let's see if I can hold up something in the book here from that.
I know my dad went to the 39 New York World's Fair, and I vaguely remember talking about seeing that when he was young. Here's television.
This is the opening spread for the chapter. And you see, this is Broadway. You see David Sarnoff there on my right. And
that's terrific.
It was great finding some color images, which, there wasn't a lot of color film still shot at the time.
Sure.
Here's the opening chapter with David Sarnoff and some tubes there that I did some artistic treatments to. And the title of this is "Do You Have a Television Face?" because that's what Radio Mirror was asking its readers in October 1936. And so I use it as kind of a theme and to delve into the World's Fair. Here's a this is actually this ad I actually have is in my collection. It's from the New York Herald Tribune, and it was a full insert in the Sunday edition for the World's Fair with RCA, and they did some color images of these three sets here.
Wow.
Let's see what else. This is a pretty well-known image right here of people in the RCA exhibition. And I actually have an audio recording. Ben Grauer, if you guys are familiar with him, he's the very first RCA animated peacock, which from 1957. This predates the Laramie peacock by about 5 years. And this is the Coming of God, the full orchestra swirl, the timpani. And I mean, it's amazing colored announcement. And he was the one who intoned this program is brought to you in living color. Well, Ben Grauer had worked for RCA for quite some time, and he is actually the announcer on the audio introduction when people walked into the RCA exhibit at the World's Fair. And I actually have an audio disc that they used. They used vinyl records at the time. I think it's 33 RPM. And let me see if I can find it. I actually have I quoted what he says. This is what he says. Ladies and gentlemen, RCA cordially invites you to witness a complete demonstration of television exactly as it would be in your own home. The next group goes into the RCA theater and television suite immediately. The line forms directly behind the airplane in the rear of the television gardens. There is no admission charge. Everybody is invited. And I actually had that transcribed. I had them do a digital copy of that record because I didn't have the equipment to copy it. But sure. I was amazed to find a copy of that. So we go from the World's Fair into World War II. And I chose to do something. I had a book called published by Caldwell Clements, who did a lot of radio and television stuff at the time. And this, you may have seen this, it's called Radio and Television Retailing, Get Ready Now to Sell Television. And this was in 1944, they published this book. And it told dealers how, they didn't have television sets, but it told them how to sell television without television and get their customers ready to buy a set after the war. And so that chapter that I have in here about television during World War II, a lot of it is based on what they told their dealers to do. Some of it's pretty funny, particularly about their sales meetings and how they told people not to let their salespeople be distracted by the switchboard operator or a window that they could look out. And so I talk about that in this book. This is I believe it's 1944, a GE double-page color spread about television coming soon to your home. And I got this booklet years ago, and it's the only one I've ever seen. I've never seen this ad reproduced anywhere, but I have the double-page spread in the book, and so you can see it in that. And then the next chapter is actually the introduction of television after the war. And as you know, the first sets, people likely saw them in bars or public places. And so I talk about, what it was like watching a program in a bar and the culture of that and how that played out. And another thing that I heard about but didn't really know too much was the 1947 RCA television caravan. And this was a group, let me show you a picture here.
8.
This was a group of 12 men and women who did a caravan in these six Jeep station wagons.
Oh, cool.
They went across the country, and and they went to 22 United department stores that were far flung across the country, and they crisscrossed the country. They spent 5 months doing this tour, and they demonstrated television in these department stores. They would set it up. They had a day to set it up, and then they would do their points. And it was sponsored by a lot of advertisers who were interested in potentially, selling their products on television. Uh, One of the interesting facts is that women were involved in this. This woman was a camera operator. And as she said, I think they interviewed her, she said it was one of the few jobs post-war that was available to women outside of being a secretary or housewife. One of I actually found the daughter of Lou Sposa, who was the director of this caravan. Here he is in the middle of it. And she provided photographs and documentation for me. And what they're doing right here, see the woman in the fur coat with
Sure.
the
Yep.
butcher's mitt and the face
Yep.
mask?
Ha, yep.
What they would do to demonstrate U.S. Rubber's products, that an egg wouldn't even break when it was bounced off. Somebody would go to the top floor of these department stores, toss an egg down, it bounced on the rubber mat, and she was supposed to catch it in the glove. Well, usually that worked, but sometimes it didn't, and the egg splattered all over. So you can imagine a woman with literally egg on her face and on her fur coat running into the department store, in
Right.
tears. And that happened at least on one occasion, which I talk about in here. But um, this tour was pretty amazing, and the only thing I wish, and I haven't come across it yet, is that somebody had kept a journal. Because these were 12 mostly unrelated men and women, and they're in close confines. They're in these Jeeps. You can imagine driving. They did not have the interstates like we do today. These were two-lane roads,
Yeah.
maybe paved, and if they were paved, they were pretty ruddy. And they're driving in Jeeps with, electronic equipment, 1947, circa 1947. It's, all tubes and everything that can break. But apparently Jeep claimed that that their rubberized mats in the back and everything, apparently they didn't lose any equipment traveling thousands of miles back and forth.
Wow. They must have at least one repair person that was, in one of those Jeeps just in case.
You'd think, well, they did have there was, I think Gulf Oil was involved as a sponsor. So when they got to a town, Gulf Oil would have banners, they would announce it. I think they serviced the Jeeps, but they did not provide free gasoline for them.
Sure. Sure.
So the shortly thereafter is you have people, when the sets are actually available in stores, and people weren't the first ones to buy them. The sidewalk viewing was a big thing in
Oh, I
this
bet.
country. And it's interesting. You don't think about the trash and everything that's left by the people on the sidewalk, but that was an issue. And there's a salesman that I quote in here about what he would find sweeping up. And
Uh,
it was more than just gum and peanuts and popcorn.
oh, geez.
And let's see what else is on here.
What's really interesting about what you're telling us is the mass marketing that went into this, prior to the product being available. Because it was available pre-World War II, as you mentioned, like during the World's Fair. So, it's one of those really targeted mass marketing before even the product was available, which is really probably the first time in this country we did something to that level. Because most of the time people marketed things, it was a curiosity. Instead, it started being marketed while it was available, like radio and so forth. Whereas this seemed to like they saw the potential and they started marketing well before the product was even in people's hands.
Yeah, besides, fairs, there were a lot of exhibitions that I wasn't even aware of where people, and county fairs was a big thing. There were a lot of Miss Television contests at county fairs and exhibitions, and, to get people to come to these and participate. And it's WSM in Nashville, the big radio station there. They got into television, and they actually had a major tenant event that people came to that I write about in there. Um, and that's interesting to hear, what it was like to actually be at one of these things.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm doing a line of T-shirts, and this is one of the images. This family watching the set here
That's
from
funny.
the station. Yeah, this ad was actually just black and white. I had to clean it up and I colorized it, and it took me some time to do, but it really pops off the thing here. It almost
Yeah.
has it's a drop shadow on it, so it almost has a 3D effect
Yeah.
when you see it in the book.
That's cool.
And here's another one. This is WSUN Sun TV. I believe this is in Florida.
Oh, sure. Okay. I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, so that image
That's
I'm using
awesome.
books. Let's jump ahead here. Um, when the FCC froze new station uh, being built for a number of years, and when they finally let new stations be built again, all of a sudden there was a pent up demand for television sets. As these stations appeared in towns across the country. And what happened is, even with the legitimate people selling sets, then you had the shady guys, like drug dealers, promoting and trying to foist off, stuff that had been returned or was broken, and selling them basically off train cars or backs of their automobiles. And talk about a couple case histories in this. And it was so bad that, where's this ad? It said, when television comes to Wichita, don't let this happen. And then it tells what actually happened. I believe this was in Denver. And they ended up, once the television station was announced, they had people who had no business selling sets. These were not radio dealers. There were people selling sets like mortuaries and people in drugstores, people you would never think to be selling television sets. And it just created a major problem. And as word got back from one city that had this issue to another, then eventually, and once the stations things calmed down, then it didn't become quite a problem. But with uh, repairmen, it could still was still an issue for a while. You would get these shady repairmen would come out and replace tubes either with bad tubes or pull a new tube and say it was bad. And there were a number of occasions where uh, people were arrested for this kind of business practices. And I think in New York at one point they had they had the police go in. They marked tubes. They would have somebody, a shady repairman, repair their set, but they had marked tubes in it, so they knew what tubes were being pulled out by the shady repairman and what he was replacing them with, and so they were able to arrest people and stop that way.
Interesting.
One of the big things when television sets were first introduced in American homes is, where are we going to put the TV set? And if you remember, homes, the focal point of most homes at the time was the fireplace, and or then they had radios. And so,
Sure.
you didn't have to watch a radio, but now they had to have some spot where people could group to watch a set. And so this was a particular problem for American homes. And there was no, there were a lot of people who had newspaper reporters and columnists who had ideas about where a television set should be placed in a home, and people would show renderings where they thought they should go,
Oh, sure.
architecture.
Yeah. What's kind of interesting about that point, Steve, is that the invasion of the TV at that era coincides very much with the start of the suburbanization of the country.
Yeah,
Like because like my parents bought a house, in Long Island, of Long Island originally, and the big Levitt development that went on
Oh,
was
Levittown?
Robert. Yeah, both my parents taught at Levittown School System. We lived in adjacent town in Wantagh, and they bought their house in 1956. So you could think about it is that you can imagine these marketing people saying, well, there's going to be a TV every one of those houses because it's the famous suburban sprawl. But you can see them lining up everything, building houses, and the style of the houses would more align with the photo you just sent,
Yeah.
than which.
I think Levittown and some of the developments, I think television set was actually included in the purchase of the house. So there was that,
Interesting.
a way to get people to buy your home, to throw in something like that. Uh, the first family to own a television set on a block, they had they would invite people to come over, and sometimes they had people just drop in. And here's a couple images of people having a television party.
Oh, cool. Yep, yep.
And this one over here tells you what, the stylish woman should wear for a television party.
That doesn't happen today.
No, no. And here's something about bad neighbor policy. I guess this is either warning
Having your TV on
someone
too
about,
loudly?
huh?
Having your TV on too loudly?
No, it's about when somebody drops in to watch your television set. There's a whole thing, and I talk about manners, television manners. What should you do if you own a set and so comes in and you want to watch another program? There was a whole protocol for this that I talk about in the
Wow.
book.
Interesting.
Uh, yeah. Uh, Big thing was taking pictures off your television screen at the time here on my right.
Okay.
And this actually was, I believe this article was in TV Guide. It told you how to the camera settings. Now, and it was pretty tricky at the time because, unlike today, basically, if you're taking a picture with your smartphone of a TV set, they're in sync because they're probably, 30 frames per second. But shooting film at that time was a little trickier when you're trying to shoot a 30 frame per second image off a TV set. And if you didn't know what you're doing, you might get half image or no image at all. So this article was telling you what to do. This guy here, his name is Royce Hoyle. He was actually shot pictures off his TV set 1957 to 62, and his kids published this pamphlet with his photographs in it. And I
Wow.
actually have a copy of that. And then this guy over here was probably a high school, maybe early college student, and from a wealthy family. And he had a Polaroid camera, 35 millimeter camera, and he had a TV set in his dorm room, which was somewhat unusual at the time.
Hmm.
He would shoot pictures off his TV set, and he kept them in this little Polaroid photo book, which I acquired from an estate in Florida. So I imagine that's where he retired, possibly passed away, and I found this on eBay, and it's pretty amazing. The photographs that he took off the TV set himself and his other things that he owned.
Oh,
One of talking about taking photographs off a TV set. Was a pretty amazing set of photographs that I came across. And this is actually a young boy who went to a children's TV program. It's in Nashville. Yeah, Nashville. And he was accompanied by, it looked like his mother and aunt, and possibly his father. And the father, I believe, shot the images of his son off a monitor, and they're pretty pristine.
wow.
So
That's
he
pretty
knew what he was
clear.
doing. Yeah, and let me turn this light back on here.
No, no problem.
And you can see the monitor down below. And then over here is a picture of the boy and his mother, and I believe his aunt, and then on the show with the children's host. But it was pretty, I couldn't believe those photos when I found those on eBay.
Wow.
And
And that's early 50s, would you say?
I'm gonna say mid mid to late 50s from the looks of everything here. It was WLAC in Nashville, and I note here in the book that it operated as that until 1975 when it changed the station ID to WTVF.
Interesting.
And children and television were a big thing. I basically babysat my television stuff, and I collect photos of people on their television sets, and I've come across a lot of children and television sets.
Oh,
And
sure.
one of the great stories of early television is this ad that was produced by the by the Television Manufacturers Association in 1950, and you may have seen this somewhere. There are some things a son or daughter won't tell you, and this ad created a national furor that like had no bounds. And there was an educator, Angelo Petrie. Let's see if his face is in here. Here he is at the bottom, his little blurb about endorsing that television sets are great for kids. And he got paid a couple $1,000 for
Sure.
that. Well, what happened is all of a sudden people took offense that somebody was telling them that they weren't worthy if they didn't buy their child a television set. So this created furor across newspapers and radio stations across the country. People wanted his column. This guy was a famous national educator. He had a column. He had been a national educator since the early mid 20s, I think. And now people basically wanted him fired. And the stuff that happened was amazing. Eleanor Roosevelt got into this. She had lent her name to the thing, and so she had to step back from it. And there was even a radio version of this ad that they actually did a song. I think off the top of my head is I think I want a television set for Christmas, and it was actually a little jingle that they would play on radio stations. I actually have a copy of it here, and there's a whole story about this with twists and turns as to what happened about this ad and the backlash that the Television Manufacturers Association got, and particularly Andrew Petrie, and how this thing just snowballed into it's worthy of a movie, I can tell you that. Eventually everything
Oh.
worked out, but not without some doing. And of course, here's the look out for the television tinkers. And this is, yeah.
Love it.
Here's an oil. This is actually a real oil painting. I have this. Somebody sent this to me when I was shooting the TV Man documentary. They'd heard that what I was doing, and they asked if I wanted it. I hadn't even said. I said sure. So I think I paid for shipping costs, and they gave it to me. And as you can see, it's a father trying to work on the set. He's got it pulled apart, and his wife is coming home with her kids, and she's not too happy seeing him through the window.
The crying kids, no TV.
Yeah, yeah. I suffered through that myself. My father would attempt to fix a set in the garage, and it was on the fritz for a couple days before he finally called Jim's TV repair. And here's some do or don'ts that, as you guys probably know, you don't want to touch this
Yeah.
unless you trip across the room.
Yeah. That's awesome. These little warning tags and advertisements like that. Yeah, because there are a lot of, we were talking just before everybody joined about, people fixing TVs because they thought they knew better. My Aunt Helen being one said that I think wrecked her TV or probably had to go to the repairman because she thought she knew better, fiddling around with the screwdriver and bright flash. Fortunately, she was okay. But um, you know, that's really interesting because uh, we actually have some, members here. It's funny you mentioned like actually do real work. I'm sure you've heard the Philco Predicta. Unfortunately, the
Oh
guy
yeah.
the guy who actually has one is actually can't make today's meeting. Is usually is a regular, but he has a family event. But yeah, that of course you think of like watching the Jetsons. You see, boy, the TV design. It's just like they just go hand in hand. But yeah, there's some classic TVs which we all enjoy, even though I understand they're a nightmare to work on. But do you foresee, now that looked like a terrific book. I mean, what's really interesting is the really early stages of televisions making their way to the households. Do you see other TV related topics or books coming your way out of
Well,
you?
in the back of my mind, I've always wanted to do one about color television and about the fight, basically, between David Sarnoff and Peter Goldmark. And what I would need access to are their private papers that are involved with the color television war, as it were, at the time. And it's actually, I see it as a two-part thing. One is, basically Peter Goldmark, the mechanical version, versus RCA's early electronic version, which wasn't very good. And then once, Sarnoff managed to weasel his way, into proclaiming the electronic system is then he was faced with what was going to happen after. And it was an uphill climb, as you guys know. It was a good 10 years from the time the first RCA electronic color sets were sold before they actually started to see any profit margin on those things. And they tried everything. And I have some materials that I got when I was doing research for the first book. It State Historical Society of Madison, Wisconsin, because they ended up getting half of RCA's / NBC's papers. The other half went to the Library of Congress. So it's going to involve doing some traveling and, money. And I'm hoping, I would find a sponsor for that. So far, I've paid for everything myself on these books. The advance I got on Window to the Future here basically paid for what it cost me, an investment to produce the book. So I never
Sure.
really made any money on that. This one stands to do different, because it's being self-published and I don't have to deal with, mailing them out myself and so on. Amazon handles all that. And they did a pretty good job of printing this, I must say. There's a library edition for the Glass Eye Invasion that's coming out September 2nd that I'm going to, try and get libraries to purchase. I had to go through a whole thing. I had to get a Library of Congress control number. If you've never heard
Really?
of that, I hadn't either.
Yeah.
And then librarians apparently are pretty lazy, the ones who purchase books. They don't want to, they want somebody to tell them what to buy. So they listen to reviews of books. And so I'm trying to get some professional reviews, academic reviews actually, from like Library Journal and so on. And it takes a couple months for them to review your book. So I had to hold off on publishing the hardcover library edition to be able to get that, to get the librarians to buy the book for their libraries. And
Um,
library sales are immense. You can imagine how many
yeah.
libraries and institutions are across this country. So it would be helpful to have a review that I don't have to sit there and say, well, if it's not, if the librarian's saying, well, it's not in the library journal, I don't, I don't buy anything that's not in that, So to avoid that, I'm trying to get it reviewed. But I did have to get a library control number, and that was kind of interesting, which I have now.
Interesting.
So
Now, the version you just showed, is that what they call the paperback version?
yeah, this is
That's
a trade. This is a trade paper, and Uh, I'm this version. I was having issues when I designed this in Affinity Publishing, and I was having issues in this thing exporting the whole thing as one file. And finally, I had to split the book in half and go ahead and render it as a PDF file that way. And interestingly enough, in doing that, it actually upped the luminescence of the color. The color became much more brilliant on the PDF. So I thought, well, if it's going to be that bright on the PDF, it's got to be that good on the printed version, which it turned out to be. So I'm really happy with the way the Amazon version looks. they have rules about what they will do and will not do. And I had one issue originally when this book was designed for a traditional publisher. I had wallpaper in the front and the back. And what wallpaper is, if you're not familiar, is that when you open a book, the first thing you see on the left and right pages are generally what they call wallpaper, where there's some kind of artistic work. It tends to look like a curtain or some kind of curtain image, and you have that in the front and the back of the book. And I had designed one with I thought some pretty good images to give you a sense of what was going to follow in the book. Well, apparently Amazon didn't like the fact that the text was illegible, went off the page, and it was supposed to be that. I mean, it wasn't supposed to be something where people could read it. It was more of supposed to be an emotional thing, but they did not like that, and they kept throwing it back in my face. And so finally, I just pulled those pages, the wallpaper out, because of Amazon, and finally that seemed to do it. And then they finally approved the book for printing. But it was, I was pulling my hair out of my head, and I've never self-published a book before, so I know a lot more than I did, I can tell you that.
That's really terrific. I really like, I think the content and a lot of the stories you're trying to tell, tell the reader there. I think it's a nicely organized book from what you've just shown us.
Thanks. Yeah, and all this, you have to remember, all this happened within a very short period of time, 5 years. And if you think about, and this was a major thing, we were so used to video stuff because of smartphones and tablets and computers that, the only video item they had were television sets at the time. And so it was a major cultural explosion that occurred during that very short period of time. And it changed, well, this country forever, and still has ramifications today, even as we look at smartphones and the way people view video.
I have some comments having to do with the World Fair in 1939 and 40. My mother took me to see myself on TV, and there was this whole wall full of 3-inch screens, and one would stand in the right place, and one would see oneself on this huge number of little screens. And I was very disappointed because I expected to see a great big screen. I was not ready, just to see all of these dinky little screens, but that's the way it was.
So you were actually there.
I was actually there, yeah. And then starting in 1946, RCA produced what it's called the RCA 630, which had 30 tubes and a 10-inch screen. And it turned out to, before there were all sorts of efforts to make it with less tubes and all of that stuff, the 630, which I think lasted for 3 years, was established a really good reputation for durability. And I met one family somewhere in the mid-50s, or early 50s anyway, who had gotten a service contract when they bought their set from RCA, and they renewed it every year. And by the time I saw that set, maybe 1953 or something like that, the RCA was getting a bit impatient because there weren't that many technicians left who really were familiar with the 630. But I believe this family continued to operate that set and pay their service contract every year until finally, I think RCA simply gave them a new set in order to get out of the whole thing. And the other thing was had to do with what happened when suddenly TV sets would invade one's home. And one after one, I saw various high school classmates' grades get decimated because when the TV came into the house, everybody sat around watching the TV with TV dinners in their hands and watching and watching and watching, no matter how miserable the programming was. And it really did affect people's grades. So
Yeah,
anyway,
that was a big thing. Discussions about television and children, their education, and they did. There were studies done that where it showed that their grades dropped as people watched television more and more. So you're right. There really was an issue with that.
I'll tell you another anecdote about child education. My best friend lived a couple of blocks from me, and his dad was talking about getting a color TV. And I think this was in maybe 58, 59. And I was a Boy Scout. And those of you who were in scouting might remember there was a journal called Boy's Life that was published, and it was full of all these advertisements. And I don't know how I did it, but I convinced my mother and father, and my father was a physicist, so I think he was just teaching me a lesson. But the ad was for a genuine color TV for $1.98. And so, I convinced them to write a check and I sent it in. Any idea what I got in the mail?
Yeah, you got that saran wrap plastic screen.
Oh, that's right.
It was a plastic sheet that had red, green, and blue arbitrarily deposited on it. And boy, the fact that I remember that 65 years later suggests that it was definitely a learning moment. And by the way, my friend's father did get a color television. It was the first in our community. And my recollection of the first shows I saw was Bonanza and Disney's Wonderful World of Color. So I think that makes it maybe into the 60s, not in the 50s. But and I live in Schenectady, New York, Steve, so you probably are very aware of the General Electric history.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And one of the earliest broadcasters is a television station that I could literally throw a hardball to from my house. And it was part of the WGY original radio station that goes back to the early 20s.
Yeah.
But they got it. They got the FCC to grant them WRGB, which it is to this day.
I remember.
And WRGB, as I'm sure you know, is Walter Baker's initials. And Baker was a key player and an element of television. That's more on the technical side. So I know it's not the focus of your comments tonight, but just some anecdotes that I remember.
That's fun. That's cool. Very interesting. Did anyone else have any anecdotes or comments or other questions for Steve? We really do appreciate the
just one little thing in terms of what one sent away for, and it was the Captain Midnight atomic bomb ring. And this ring was offered for a very, very short time. I got one because I sent right away because it contained radium. So that was my special thing to get my hands on.
That's
I appreciated it because how quickly they stopped offering it anymore.
Yeah, I saw a photograph of that, oddly enough, just the other day on Facebook or something, and I'd never seen that before.
That's
Do you have one? Did you get one?
Did you? What pair you're? There you go.
It's highly unlikely that I could still lay my hands on it if I even have it at all. But as I said, I was very proud of ordering it right away so that it actually came before they stopped selling them altogether.
Well, you're still alive, so I guess there wasn't enough radiation in it to kill you.
Yeah.
Completely irrelevant to television technology and the focus of this forum is the other side of the coin of me being sucked into those $1.95 specials. So I don't remember. It was probably 75, 76. I saw an ad once again. I remember it for $1.98, and they would send you 25 strawberry plants. So I sent it in and I got this envelope, and I don't even know how to describe it. It looked like vegetation that had been sitting outside for 20 years. It was just dried weeds. But I followed the directions and planted these strawberry plants.
Okay.
And in 3 years, I had 6,000 plants.
Wow.
They were so I don't know what the word is, but they were so prolific and energetic that they would set the runners. So every plant would set another 10. And then you do the math and you go from 25. And I actually had to have a professional come in and eradicate them because it was taking over my backyard.
Wow. Well, you got your money's worth, Bob.
Yeah, so I don't feel as bad about the television screen. Yeah. So, well,
It's funny. One point you raised, Steve, that you're talking about Levittown about them maybe giving a TV for every house. I'm starting to wonder because I was thinking about this. Predates me being born. Is my parents? I remember mentioning their first TV. What we had a black and white Philco, which we started out with, which I
Uh-huh.
grew up. That I bought before I was born. They made a point of saying, "Oh, we had a TV before that." And I don't think, and so they had bought that house in '56, and the Philco thing was bought around like 59 or 1959. So I'm thinking that they might have mentioned it, never just stuck in my brain, but they may have been one of those people that got like a TV when they bought the house, when they had the house built. But the TV may not have lasted, or it might be just like a little 9-inch screen or something that
Yeah. You know,
But
if I remember correctly, I think I've seen a photo of the set. They actually had an alcove dug into the wall for the set in the Levittown developments, I think. Now, I may be confusing that with something else, but I'm pretty sure I saw a photo of the set actually like in a model home.
interesting.
So,
Now, the ones
yeah.
that didn't seem to have a particular incident that I can recall, but it might have been just a position they might have recommended you put it. But I remember though that they replaced it with a Philco. Maybe, and what I don't know is whether it's because the TV died or they decided, okay, this is just way too small, and bought something a little bit. It was only a 15-inch Philco, so it wasn't all that huge. Um,
Mhm.
but it's funny. We had that TV for a long time. In fact, actually, my first color TV that arrived in our household didn't arrive until 1975 for us. So that Philco,
Really?
yeah, my parents were like, "Hey, this thing works, and we're not, and live with
We're
it."
gonna get our
And
money's worth out of
all my friends have color are like, "No,
it.
we only got a handful of channels though. Long Island we had plenty, but then we moved up to upstate New York in the Hudson Valley, and I was like, well, okay, your song became very sparse, so you get a channel or two, and that was it. So
Yeah.
I think that was part of the motivation. My father was like, yeah, no, I'm not doing anything, and then finally he broke down. And he bought a Sony Trinitron, which was one of the standard bearers of
Yeah.
color TVs at the time.
Yeah.
And it was like 17-inch. We was like, wow, we got another 2 inches. That's huge.
I
You
remember I begged my parents for 7 or 8 years to buy a color TV set, which they did in fall of 1966. But prior to that, my grandparents, they had gone to Las Vegas and gambled and won some money, and they bought a color TV set. It was the first one that I saw outside of a store, first one that I knew anybody owned. And this was like just about, I think, the year Bonanza debuted in 1959. So we would go over there, and I remember on Saturday nights, Bonanza would be playing on a Saturday night and in color. And they also did the local NBC station, which was KRCA then. They did the local news, 15 minutes with Jack Latham. It was broadcast in color, and they did live Knudsen cottage cheese commercials on there. And it's like imprinted on my mind seeing that cottage cheese commercial in blue and white. All these years later, it's such an impression. And uh, I could have lived there and watched the TV. My parents wouldn't have allowed it.
yeah, but It's kind of interesting, when you think of where we are today, it's, the goal back then was like to get a TV in every household. And then it
Yeah,
started turning into a TV into every major room. So the idea is, okay, we get one for the bedroom, maybe one for the kids' bedroom if they were really lucky. Um, and then you have so multiple TVs per household. And now today we're like everyone has a personal device, the explosion based on population that you have this, iPhone or an iPad, whatever it is, and you essentially every person, the goal is every person has got at least one of those devices, if not more than one. I mean, it's almost every kid, and adult's got a phone. They could probably, stream, except for, a small percentage of, people who have flip phones, and then they probably have an iPad, some other device, whether it's a laptop or an iPad or something else that you can watch, whatever you want.
I
It's
didn't even have my own phone, and let alone, and TV. I had to sell Christmas cards when I was 14 to buy my own TV set. So,
Are you familiar with Mike Molnar? Do you know who he is?
mm,
He has done really in-depth research on the history of television, but again, not focused on the social element of it and the societal element, mostly on the history. I've had him speak at a couple of presentation venues that I organize, and he wrote a like 130-page article, and I'm thinking that it couldn't have been in NEVEC. Maybe it was in the Antique Wireless Association's
Yeah,
journal.
probably.
Yeah, I think their journal tends to get more of those, educational articles. But it's Molnar. If that's something that interests you, is to go deeper into the technical end. He's the
it's
guy.
possible I may have come across him. I have a lot of books on television, not programming necessarily, but on the actual medium. And so it's possible I may have a book of his if he had something published. So,
I don't know whether he has published in the conventional sense. I think he makes articles available through other vehicles, but
hmm.
he's really, really knowledgeable about every intimate detail from the very first concepts in the UK by Laird all the way through, the Sarnoff and all the other things that happen, particularly with standardization and so forth. So
Yeah, Mike is with NJARC. I see him regularly on the meetings. I'll tell him you
okay.
folks had some interest. Maybe we can get you together somehow. Send me an email if you want, aa2pm@earthlink.net. And I'll get that over to Mike. And I know he's also involved in the Early Television Foundation. I see him on those meetings as well.
Okay, well, I mean that speaks to his interest. I didn't know there was even such a institution as the Early Television Foundation, but that
Oh, it's
seems where,
huge.
yeah, it
Yeah,
seems where he would be home.
Yeah, they're in Ohio. They do have
yeah.
a web presence, so take a look. And they do have monthly meetings, and they're kind of open to people about, public.
Yeah, they actually have a museum. I don't know if they're open for regular tours, but you can arrange a tour of it. And they're outside of Columbus.
Yeah,
Uh,
I don't
I
recall their hours, but they are
Yeah,
open.
it's pretty extensive. Outside of that is the MZTV Museum in Toronto. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. Moses Zamer, he
Mm.
was a broadcaster and started with his private collection, and now it's gone beyond that. And I've been there, and it's pretty interesting. They did a traveling sort of roadshow version of that years ago, and I happened to be in Banff, Alberta, Canada, on vacation, and they had an exhibit in town there that I went to, and John Logie Baird's grandson, Ian Baird, was there, and that's where I first heard about the MZTV Museum. And yeah, if you ever get a chance, it's definitely worth going to.
Yeah, you just reminded me that I misspoke. I said Laird before. I was just another mental
Oh, I knew
glitch.
who you meant. I knew
Yeah.
who you meant.
Well, this was terrific, Steve. One thing you're welcome to do is if there's any like, especially like even YouTube content, if since we've been emailing each other, if you're welcome to forward that to me, or you can drop it in the chat window. But if you want to forward that to me, I will absolutely make that for it and available to the club members, in our email reflector.
Sure.
And just in case, for more information, they'll see more about, some of the videos you've posted or podcasts or so forth.
Yeah, I'll look. I definitely am thinking of that little, it's about a minute of the parade footage that morphs into the book cover. And if I've got a lot of stuff, a lot of YouTube videos for various things. I'll have to go through there and see what's TV related that you guys would be interested in. But my various interests that have resulted in videos. For a while, I was doing a lot of videos. Not so much anymore, but I did quite a few at a time for various projects that I was working on.
Well, this, and also, like I said, not only in the meeting agenda, but I also add it when I post a YouTube video. I will certainly add the link to your book because it is available on Amazon.
Yeah,
And I understand. I appreciate you making the distinction because it mentions a hard copy and a paperback, because they use the term paperback. It's like, paper, that doesn't seem like something would be a paperback, but when you show me your version,
yeah,
that makes sense, a soft copy, and that's actually a nice way to look at the book as well. It looks like
yeah.
it came out.
I would suggest that people get the trade paper, the paperback copy over the over the hardcover library edition, because Ingram, which is publishing that, they're the one. Ingram is supplies or retails books to bookstores and libraries and basically everything that's non-Amazon. They do gift shops and so on. And I'm not too happy. The hardcover version is going to be fine for libraries, but I didn't like the way the color came out. They charge more for color printing. And so to do adjustments and stuff, so I'm making at least $1 off a book off the hardcover. I had to downgrade the color printing on that. And I just got an advanced copy of that book today. And compared to the Amazon copy, not only does it cost more for the hardcover, but the printing is better in the Amazon copy. So if you're looking for a suggestion, you want to get the book, I would go with the Amazon copy. You might even, there are some other online sellers. They're getting them from Amazon. I don't know how, but they're reselling them, and sometimes cheaper than Amazon. So, just do a search right now, The Glass Eye Invasion, and wherever the book is for sale now. What happens after September 2nd, you're going to start seeing the Ingram copies, which are the ones that go to bookstores and libraries. And I would avoid that one personally, just because I'm not happy with the way they did the color printing. Especially, they're charging a lot to publish that book, and yet the color to me is not up to snuff on it like it is on the Amazon. I'm pretty happy with the Amazon. It's glossy. The pages are glossy. I mean, it jumps out at you, which is what it was intended to do. So
Yeah, it looks quite nice from all you've shown us. It looks terrific.
yeah, I wanted to do an immersive. I wanted to bring people, especially people who are not familiar, have very little knowledge of television. I wanted to bring them into that world and that time and do an immersive experience, without having to have some sort of glasses or whatever to look at it. So I designed the book the way thought I personally would like to see it, and there's not a lot of white space. It's jam packed with images and my artwork, and so I think it turned out. I'm pretty happy with it.
Are you familiar with bookbaby.com? Did you ever explore that?
Oh yeah, I looked into that. Now I'm hearing different things. Some people, their promotions on their claim, when you see the supposed authors on there, they're really happy with it and so on. But I started to do some digging on there, and apparently they haven't been around that long, and there might be some scam operation to it. It just sounds too good to be true.
Yeah, I contributed to a book that was published last year, and we did it on BookBaby, and the model that we went with was print to order. So if somebody wanted a copy of the book, you dealt directly with them, you remitted the money, and in 5 days they would print you your copy. Your copy was no different than anybody else's copy, but
Yeah.
that's a model where there's no inventory.
Yeah.
And that may not be suitable for what model that you have, but boy, it
Well,
worked
this is
well for us because it was a niche topic, a technical topic.
well. Did you guys get your money from them?
Um, I don't have any financial interest in it
Oh,
as a contributing author. So I was just pleased that we were able to put it together. So we did the whole thing in the standard way that most people do it. We used Microsoft Word and Microsoft Publisher, and ultimately they worked with PDFs. But the book arrived that I actually ordered. I had the PDF version, but I'm just I find reading 800-page books as PDFs very tedious.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
just I still like the something that will end up as ephemera. It's probably
You
my
like a
downfall.
you like a physical copy of a book.
Yeah, and it's if you saw, I have three rooms that are full of books. So
Oh,
I
you should see
have
my place. Yeah.
so, but it's an interesting model. And I thought that the book retail price was a little pricey, but you can buy it from Amazon.
Mm.
So I didn't do that. I went directly to the publisher, BookBaby, and I just gave him that. I gave him I had a code as a contributing author to get a reduction in price, and
Hmm.
they accepted it. And a week later, I had a very well packaged book in my hand with a hardcover.
I'd be curious to know if your friend, whoever actually has a financial interest in the book, has actually been paid by them.
I will reach out to him.
Yeah, I'm curious to know that because they're whatever they say, it sounds good, but in the end, did they actually make some money off of it? When they sell books. So,
It turns out that we didn't have our objectives were not financial. Our objectives were to capture an event that took place in the 70s.
hmm
And it was among a bunch of the topic was the invention of the computed tomography scanner. So there were about 30, 40 of us who were involved in making that happen back in the mid
hmm
70s. And we've been talking about writing a book about it for I don't know how many years. And every time would slip away, and then you'd re-engage people and find out that they had passed away. And I realized,
hmm
wow, because I was only in my 20s during this time, and yet I was
uh-huh.
working with people who, life expectancy is not that long. So he
Yeah,
said, let's just do it.
yeah,
So this one fella stepped up, and he basically accumulated. We all wrote independently,
uh-huh,
and then he was super editor, if you will.
uh-huh. He
And
put everything together.
yeah, and so he was able to put it together, and it's a technical book, but there's a lot of visuals, a lot of pictures, and it has somewhat of a flow to it. I can't
Hmm.
imagine that many copies have been sold because the retail price is $80.
Uh-huh.
But anyway, I had not been familiar with that kind of model, and I explored bookbaby.com, and they apparently provide all these services. But
Yeah.
to your point, I don't know how legit they are.
Yeah, I'm a little, because they haven't been around that long, and it's, if it sounds too good to be true, it often is. So I'm curious to know if anybody, yet to hear of anybody who's actually been published by them, and I'd love to know if they've gotten paid what they were supposed to, as a result. So it'll be interesting to find out. Um, yeah, I would use Amazon again just because I had a pretty good experience once we got past that one thing. But I'm open to, other things. Traditional publishers are tough. I scored a bullseye the first time out, actually even the second time, and yet they're so picky. They don't want to do the work. They don't want to do the legwork. They just want to collect the check. Everybody seems to be lazy now. So, I sent this. I when I was developing this book, I sent them images and told them what it was, and I just couldn't get hook anybody, which is the first time that's happened. But that's just the nature of the business. It was tough even 20 years ago, from what I hear, and people were surprised my first time out that I got Went Into the Future published. But I just, events aligned. I got the right editor, So
I can't find anything on their website that says here's our history, but they make a claim of over 200,000 authors published.
yeah, it's like, well, you're gonna do that claim, give us some names, So
Right.
yeah,
Right.
it'd be interesting to see what happens to them, but I have heard of them, so.
Well, the one thing is that is that we hope that you'll continue to keep putting out books on TV. Look, the way you've done it looks really great. I guess you had to
Yeah.
go to I guess you had to go to eBay to go find your first book, because I guess being out of print, eBay is a great place. Sometimes you get good deals, and sometimes they're
Yeah,
unrealistic. But
yeah,
I have found many. Actually, I've been pretty successful finding books there for reasonable money at times on eBay.
yeah.
Surprisingly cheap. So I guess that's the way forward to find your first book.
Yeah, you can actually, in fact, Amazon still sells it if you've
Oh, did
searched
they?
for it. Yeah, you still have it on there. I don't know if they're new copies, but they're still selling. They sell used books on Amazon.
Oh, that's
So,
right. That's true.
yeah, you could find a copy of it on there too. In fact, if you just do a general search under the title, Google it, you'll see all the retailers online retailers that are selling it still. So, yeah, I may, if I can take up Chronicle on their word, I'll get the digital elements and I'll self-publish it or do a second edition myself, if Glass Eye Invasion works out. It's just a matter of promoting it and marketing it. That's something, you can pay people to do that, but you know they're more than happy to take your money, and they're not going to necessarily produce the results that you need. So, and this is not a genre book like romance or
Right.
mystery or true crime. It's a whole different flavor, and I have to find my audience, which was probably a lot of the people in Went Into the Future, so hopefully they're still alive.
Yeah,
So
well, I mean, but you found a good audience here, because a lot of us were, clearly of this age group that maybe not grew up in the early TV, but certainly grew up in the early stages of TV, can appreciate what the book, the message that you're delivering about how it all started, and all this sort of build up to an event that we sort of, take for granted.
yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
I think it definitely resonates with people who grew up during that period, So, but I think it's great, for a younger generation too.
yeah. Oh,
They're
sure.
willing to sit down and read a book and learn a little history, So,
And also, what you have in your hand, and where, its forefather, if you will, the derivation of, the TV, and on now you're this digital computer-driven device that's the size
yeah,
of the size,
who knew,
the size of your palm. Yeah.
I gotta
I
jump
think
off. Thanks. Have a good night.
No, thank
okay.
you, Paul.
Thank you.
But
I think the closest thing when we were growing up was the Dick Tracy wristwatch, video watch that he had, I think that's the thing that comes to mind, and
yeah, now you have these that are
yeah,
as close
there
to,
you got it.
there you go,
Who knew?
but who knew, um, but well, Steve, one of the things I'll do is I'll also, if you're okay with it, when I post the video, I announced to the club, our email reflector, the video of our meeting has been posted. I will add, if you're okay, I'll add your email address. Just say, hey, anyone
Sure.
who wants to reach out to Steve, have questions or other things they want to share. Also, if you want to connect you with some of the other, like
Sure.
the gentleman that Paul brought up, that'd be a way to, get a little extra exposure. If you're okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, and if they have any suggestions for promoting or marketing the book to maybe other groups or something, who knows, off the top of their head, they may hold the key to this, moving this book forward. So,
Oh, sure. I mean, I hope we can help in some way, but the one thing is we're really glad you reached out to us. I mean, it was a really fun discussion about um, televisions, because we haven't really had, in a lot of our meetings, we usually are very radio centric, not because we don't
yeah,
like TV, but we don't have many in-depth discussion other than, show photos of, because, at our events, our swap meets, there is always TVs. And I take photos of, funny enough, a lot of these working TVs, they'll be, showing like a Three Stooges episode or Gunsmoke or whatever. And I'll take a photo with my iPhone and I'll post it because I take all the photos for our events. And you'll see the still picture of like, an eye poke in motion or something like that from Three Stooges, or whatever. And it's fun to see, but but you sort of share, like you said, from the social perspective of, and the marketing and how this all came about, you see the object in the show, but you don't really think about, well, the background of how it arrived.
Yeah, I wanted to write about something that that I knew a little about, but that I didn't know much specifics. And by doing original research, I didn't use any third-party sources like other books. I went directly to source materials, newspapers, magazines from the period. And I think there is only, I do know, I didn't put an index or footnote this book, but I do give the source material, the dates and the names of where I got the information from. And there's only one other existing printed material that I quoted, which was a woman who had either a paper or a book she wrote, and I couldn't pass up this quote that she had in there. It was just too good for what I was writing about, so I actually quoted her and gave her credit in the book. But she was the only one out. Everything else is original, from the sources. So
Great. Well, the other thing I'll add is if you ever put out future books, you ever want to talk more TV, have more you wanted to share, you're always welcome to reach out and we'll slot you in. This was I certainly enjoyed having you on here to share not only about the awareness of your book, but just some really interesting stories and background here. I thoroughly thought it was a great meeting here. I really appreciate you taking the time with us.
it was my pleasure. I enjoyed it too.
We'll certainly spread the word on our side, between emails and awareness of the book and the history, because ephemera is still popular in our group. People love books on radios and some of the well-known, like the Catalan radio, the guide to the book written by what's his name, the famous book in Catalan radios. I mean, that's sort of like requirement. The Bible that's supposed to be sitting on your bookshelf, and but yeah, no, when I'm looking at the time, so it's 8:34, and normally I'll leave it up to you, Greg. Before I sort of end this part of our meeting, did anyone have any other questions or comments or anything they also wanted to share with Steve? Because I really appreciate you just allowing this to be just a discussion. But I'm looking at the clock. It's 8:34, and Greg, I think you were going to be about 30 minutes.
Yeah, about 20. I mean, maybe we hold off to a different time for it. A lot of people are dropping off already.
Because maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll just push it off. Hey Steve, you ever interested enjoying any of these things? Say, hey, there's a topic I'd like to know about. I'll happily send you an invite to come join join our meetings. It's never a problem. Because we appreciate your time and happy to do something in return. So, if there's ever a topic you're interested, you'd like to hear about, we happen to be showing it, send me an email. I'll keep it in the air out and I'll add you. I'll send you emails saying, hey, we're going to be covering this. You're welcome to join.
Okay. Thank you.
But, well, and maybe I'll just sort of wrap up the meeting now. And thanks, Steve, again for coming and really, and educating us about his book and also about the history of TV at the early days. And I really appreciate the fun discussion. And I guess I'll let you guys go. Have a great 2 weeks. Stay cool because it's going to be hot in this part of the country, and hot and humid. The typical 3 H's. And well, we'll see you. The next meeting will be just before July 4th. And so July 2nd. So thanks, everybody. Have a great evening, great weekend, and take care of yourselves.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks again, Steve. Really appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Bye now.
Bye.